Hey there guys, today we're going to be looking at 20 different games running on the GMKtec K8. That is their newest 2024 mini PC release that is rocking a Ryzen 7 8845HS. Though again, don't let the 8000 series in the name fool you, it is just a refresh of the 7840HS. That still means it's going to be a pretty great performer. We're going to take a look at how it does across 20 different games. But before that, if you guys want to see this specific system tested across a huge amount of different games, showing the performance from the lowest to the highest graphics settings and everything, go subscribe to the EvoTech 2 channel. I'm going to be posting individual game videos on there pretty frequently on this system, where we're going to be trying it out with all of the different graphics settings. We're going to see what it takes to actually get it to be at a playable level. Think like the old videos that I would do with the 5500U. So again, go check that channel out and subscribe. And also, if we can get that channel to 1,000 subscribers, I'll be doing a giveaway of a brand new inbox GMKtec K8. So if you want a chance to win that, go subscribe to the channel and help get it to 1,000 subscribers. But anyways, let's take a look at the actual performance of this system in these 20 games. So the first game that I wanted to actually test out in this video is, of course, Helldivers 2, since it is a game that I am constantly playing. Absolutely love this game, and overall I was pretty satisfied with the performance that I got out of this system. It was for the most part around a 60 FPS average with the lowest in-game graphics settings and using FSR with the balanced preset. And I am happy to see the balanced preset being used here, since performance is really rough to look at, and balanced is an improvement, though it's still not perfect. Though if I had to choose between not playing this game or playing it like this, I'm definitely playing it like this. So it's more than passable, and the overall experience of actually playing it is really nice, even if the 1% lows don't look absolutely perfect. The frame time chart in general does seem pretty consistent. You will see the occasional spike here and there, but it's nothing disastrous. And I would consider this title to be fully playable on this system. The next title we're taking a look at is one that we also have frequently tested on this channel, and that is Tiny Tina's Wonderland. But one nice thing is that we're actually able to play it at higher settings than what we're used to. This is running with the medium in-game graphics settings, and we are also using the quality FSR preset. And we effectively end up with essentially a 60 FPS average with 1% lows that are absolutely perfect. Overall, the frame time chart does not look bad at all, and the gaming experience is actually going to be really nice on here. Though I will note that the game still suffers from a lot of pop-in due to the fact that, I'm guessing at least, it's the slow memory in general. DDR5, no matter what speed it's at, is always going to be slower than any kind of video memory, and that might explain the frequent pop-in that will happen usually when you're loading into new areas on the map. It's a little distracting in certain areas, but for the most part it's not that bad at all, and I would comfortably play the game like this. Now, taking a look at Returnal, this is a title that has really brought down a lot of mini PCs to their knees, usually demonstrating a very unplayable experience even with the most aggressive video settings. And here we do have some very aggressive video settings. We are running this with the lowest in-game graphics settings, and we are using FSR with the performance preset. This time around, we are actually able to get a somewhat playable experience out of this. I say somewhat because I still think that FSR really makes this game look like a visual mess. When you're actually trying to play, all of the different particle effects that are all over the screen just look really muddied, and in general doesn't really seem like a pleasant experience, at least to me. Maybe that's just a personal thing. It might not matter to you, and in which case at least the FPS that you're gonna get with a system like this is going to be more than passable. And the next thing that we're taking a look at is, of course, Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail. That is the new upcoming expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, and even though this is a 10-year-old MMO, this update is supposed to come with a new graphics overhaul that does seem to make things look better than they did before, but it's not necessarily a groundbreaking update. Still, as someone that has sunk over 900 hours in this game, I'm kind of excited. And it's nice to see that this system is actually able to play with the high laptop settings, and I went with the laptop settings since this is technically a laptop part apart, and I also really couldn't tell the difference between the high laptop and the high desktop settings visually, but it did seem to affect performance a bit. I found this to be the most playable, and at least the game benchmark did say that this was a more than acceptable experience, and as someone that has played the game, I'd say that is a pretty good assessment. Another title that got a pretty major graphical overhaul is Counter-Strike 2, and this graphical overhaul really pushed it out of the playability range for a lot of the Zen 1, 2, and 3 APUs. Pretty much anything that was still using Vega kind of got pushed out of relevancy in this title, but RDNA here is showing that it has a pretty dominant lead because it gives you a pretty fantastic experience even if you're terrible like me. After playing Ghostrunner 1 on my desktop, I actually was pretty excited to pick up Ghostrunner 2 for a really reasonable price, and I was kind of blown away by just how well this game runs on this system. This is pretty much all of the graphics settings set to high. They're not set to ultra, but they are set to high, though we don't have any form of AA at all enabled. And we are using FSR, but it is FSR at the quality preset, and in general, the performance was really rock solid. The 1% lows aren't perfect, but I imagine if you mess around with the settings, you could actually improve this pretty greatly. In general, though, for a brand new title, I'm really impressed. Of course, I also gave Guardians of the Galaxy a go on here, but this is running with the lowest in-game graphics settings, though FSR is set to the ultra quality preset. That does make a huge difference in making this look actually pretty visually impressive. Even with the lowest in-game graphics settings, the game still looks really nice. And without having FSR at its most aggressive settings just completely destroying the visuals, this actually does look really impressive to me. It's honestly really nice to see that you could get such great visuals out of a system without a graphics card at all. Now, I did give Fortnite a go on this system, and I used the performance setting. If I'm being honest, this is actually how I played the game for the last, 3 seasons. That's on my desktop where I had a 3070 Ti. I just prefer the look of the performance preset because of the fact that it makes everything look a lot clearer. There's a lot less shading to everything, so there's a lot less visual noise that makes it harder to see people. And by using the performance preset with this APU, I was actually able to get a very nice FPS average, but the 1% lows are at Fortnite levels of disappointing. That is to say that if you've seen Fortnite in anybody's benchmark channels, like Random Gaming in HD or Iceberg Tech, you'll know that Fortnite does have some pretty major problems with 1% lows, and they persist on pretty much any system that you're on. It doesn't really matter the configuration, so I guess we should just be happy that that FPS average is at a passable level. I also decided to give Borderlands 3 a go on here, since I know there are a lot of fans of the Borderlands series that don't really seem to like Tiny Tina's Wonderland. Borderlands 3 doesn't have native support for FSR, but it's not really necessary here because even with the medium graphics settings, we're actually getting a nice level of performance here. Though frame times actually were really rock solid, and overall it was actually an enjoyable experience to play on here for a bit. See, I prefer showing in-game benchmarks for comparative reasons, but I do also play the games themselves just in case if there's any difference in terms of performance or anomalies. But in both situations, this was actually really a great result. I did decide to give Horizon Zero Dawn a try on here, even though the newer title is already out. Zero Dawn does have a built-in benchmark, and I was curious to see if this APU could actually give us original game quality, something that the Vega-based APUs really always seem to struggle to do. They could do the lowest levels of graphics settings with FSR set to something really aggressive, but in this situation we're actually running this with the original quality settings, so PS4 level graphics, and we're using FSR, but it's FSR at the ultra quality settings. And I do like to use FSR at the ultra quality settings even if it is FSR 1.0, though that is not the case here. This is a more recent version of FSR, but even for the games that have FSR 1.0, I do like to use the ultra quality setting. Quality can depend on title because certain titles actually look visually awful even if you turn on FSR at all, but a lot of them actually do tend to look pretty good. A big offender is actually the most recent Ryzen game on desktop. If you turn on FSR, it honestly just looks so bad no matter what, even at the quality settings. Like, you just move around and the foliage is just going crazy. But overall, I'm impressed with the results here, and I'm just glad that FSR does look decent here. I did also take a look at Mountain Blade Bannerlord running on here with the medium in-game graphics settings, and we also got a great result here. Really, the main thing that I've been finding with these APUs is that what it really lets you do is a lot of these titles that other APUs were barely able to run with the lowest in-game graphics settings, you're now not just able to get playable levels of performance at the lowest in-game graphics settings, you're actually able to turn up some of the graphics settings, and really there are diminishing returns to graphics quality. When you're going from very low up to low, there could be a pretty big jump in terms of texture quality and detail, and then you go up to medium, and usually at medium is where you get a huge bump in terms of visual quality because they start to enable a lot of the effects and a lot of the detail starts to come out in things. So then going up to high or very high or even ultra will just enable fewer and fewer effects that end up becoming just extremely costly and don't necessarily do a lot to change the visuals. So the fact that we're able to get the medium means we already get a lot of the graphical benefits, and that's really great to see. Of course, if we go back to some older titles, there are still some pretty demanding ones. Like here, Deus Ex Mankind Divided is running with the lowest in-game graphics settings at the full 1080p resolution. The game does not support FSR or anything like that, so this is just the full resolution, and you can see that we're still getting very decent levels of performance. This is a title that in other videos that you might have seen on my channel would actually make systems struggle. Here, that's just not the case at all. We're getting a very nice, very smooth experience. And that does mean that for a more story-driven game like this, if you're willing to sacrifice 60 FPS, you do have some headroom to start turning up some graphics settings. A lot of the times, though, you do benefit from just being able to turn up your textures to their highest. And in that scenario, it's usually why it's better to allocate 8 gigabytes of RAM to your mini PC if you have the RAM for it, because then games won't ever bother you about not having enough VRAM to turn up your textures. Another title that also was a great performer on here that normally makes mini PCs struggle is Rise of the Tomb Raider here running with the high graphics settings. And even with the high graphics settings, we're getting a more than playable gaming experience, and that means that we aren't sacrificing any visuals to try to play a game like this. And I think one of the biggest benefits of a mini PC like this being this powerful is that you now have multiple generations of consoles worth of games that are accessible to you. Because realistically, if you were buying a Vega level mini PC, well, you're kind of stuck at the latest, the end of the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 era to early PlayStation 4 at most. Of course, there are modern indie titles that you can play, but that's not necessarily going to be all the games you want to play. And I know a lot of people really like to get excited about emulation and stuff like that, but one of the things that I enjoy the most about PCs is the fact that there kind of isn't a need for emulation, really. At least not if you're trying to play native PC titles. That might seem like a pretty obvious statement to make, except when you really think about it, we're talking about games that span multiple decades. And with companies like GOG putting in the effort to at least package games with fixes in ways that makes them playable to this day. Part of the appeal of a mini PC like this to me for gaming is the fact that you're not kind of just gonna be stuck playing only one generation of games. Like if you got a Switch, you are only going to play Switch games, only games ever made during the Switch's lifetime. Or you're buying Nintendo titles that are at this point decades and decades old and stuff like that, but you're paying for each one of those individually at some ridiculous prices. And even then, that library isn't not exactly very expansive. While here, I mean, if you bought a game 20 years ago on Steam, well, you pretty much have it. And I mean, the title we're looking at here, Killing Floor 2, it's a game that I still go back to play pretty frequently just because of how simple yet fun it is, even though it's been around for pretty much a decade. But because of that, also, I'm able to play it on a system that is this low power, and I'm able to play it at high graphics settings, and it's not like I'm getting barely 60 or anything like that. Our 1% lows are practically at 60. This is a awesome gaming experience. And if you really want high FPS, just turn things down to medium. Visually speaking, you're not really sacrificing a whole lot, and now you're getting a lot closer to having a high refresh rate gaming experience. And here, the Mafia 2 Definitive Edition is running with the highest in-game graphics settings, except for AA, and the level of performance is fantastic. So whether you have the original Mafia 2 game or you have its HD remaster, you're actually able to play it all at the highest in-game graphics settings. And that's pretty great to see. Very quickly, you start to kind of realize the large library of titles that you actually can play with a system like this. I see people complain a lot of the times when manufacturers start to actually say that these are gaming PCs. They'll quickly start to talk about how, oh, it's just laptop parts that are just put into a computer box. They don't even have graphics cards. They can't really do too well in gaming. And I mean, you just have such a huge library of games to play that it's actually ridiculous. This isn't the same as trying to use Intel integrated graphics to play a game at 480p. This is 1080p getting essentially 60 FPS with 1% loads that are more than acceptable in a title that is running at its highest in-game graphics setting. And that so far has been the experience of actually testing this system out on multiple titles. As you can see here with World War Z Aftermath, with the high in-game graphics settings, and we are also using FSR but at the quality preset, we're getting some great performance here, and visually the game also looks great. And this is one of those titles that I also just recommend to people. If you really want a game to sit down and play with some friends, you just want something to play some co-op with, this is pretty much it. Me and my friends had a good time playing on here, and I definitely recommend it. Of course, you can go back to some old classics and essentially play them like they are HD remastered. Here we have Bioshock Infinite running with the highest in-game graphics settings, and that includes even the effects at the ultra setting that back in the day would actually make systems struggle. You're essentially able to play this title in a way that anybody that tried to play it back in the day would need to have a monster computer to actually play, even at this resolution. Back when this title came out, I actually was still using a 900p monitor. Of course, if you are an owner of the original version of Metro Last Light, you're also going to get a great experience here with the high graphics settings. Of course, there are the Redux versions, but I have found the Reduxes to be pretty demanding in comparison to the original versions, even though the originals still look visually very, very nice. I'm kind of a huge fan of the Metro series in general, though, so maybe that's just my bias, but I just think this looks really, really good, and I'm just so impressed that you're able to play a game like this at these graphics settings on a system this small, this compact, this low power. I mean, I remember playing this title at lower graphics settings than this, with lower FPS back when it first came out. I promise you this game still holds up today. Of course, another game that always ends up showing up in the testing here is Batman Arkham Knight, running with the highest in-game graphics settings, except for all of the GameWorks stuff, since all of that is just NVIDIA exclusive. And again, just a beautiful experience. We're able to max out the title. We're able to run it at full 1080p. This is just an amazing time. What this effectively means is that if you buy one of these mini PCs and you just plop it down underneath your TV in your living room, you now have a gaming system there that you didn't need to dedicate a whole lot of space to, because you need to put in a huge computer that has a full-size graphics card just so that you could more than likely just end up playing Stardew Valley on the living room anyway. You know, you get the flexibility here of being able to play some pretty great titles at good quality settings at full 1080p. It's honestly just hard to beat how good these mini PCs are getting at this point. And of course, as we saw with Counter-Strike 2, the trend continues here in Rainbow Six Siege, where you're able to still get a high refresh rate gaming experience. And this is with the game running at ultra, so we are using FSR, but at the ultra quality preset as well. If you want to bump your performance up here, drop things settings down from ultra to very high. Trust me, you are not going to notice any difference visually, and you're going to get a nice bump in your FPS. I went with ultra just to do it, and here, I mean, it's a great result. Honestly, these mini PCs are so insanely good. I think the next year is going to be so much fun to see where the mini PC market is going. It is really growing in popularity, and as these mini PCs continue to get more and more powerful, there are going to be more and more people switching it over, because when you can play a lot of these titles at these visual settings and get great results, why do you want this monster that is using 300 watts to play the exact same thing?